Um, we really make this Christianity stuff harder than it has to be. And part of the problem is the Bible's fault, because in the Bible are all these powerful men and women of God who do all these amazing things. And then your crazy pastor says, well, you just have to be like those people in the Bible. And you go, oh yeah, sure, that's an easy one. Haven't done any miracles lately, thank you very little. But this morning there are two examples of people that we can emulate. That's a fancy $2 word that means copy. See, I went to seminary, I have to use those words once in a while or nobody believes I did. There's two individuals we can emulate in this passage, and they're pretty easy to follow. So I want you to pay attention. Don't fall asleep like you usually do. Sorry. To these two individuals, because I think we can follow their example relatively easily. First, let's talk about Timothy. Now, Timothy was a young man who was kind of an anomaly. He wasn't like most of the folks in his neighborhood. Paul tells us that his mother was a good Jew and his father was a Greek. The problem with that statement is that if his mother was a good Jew, she never would have married a Greek. Because you weren't even supposed to eat with people that weren't Jews or were Gentiles. It wasn't very long ago that if a Jewish girl married any kind of other kind of a guy, she would cause all kinds of trouble for her family. And that wasn't maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago. This was 2,000 years ago. Imagine the stir this caused in the community. Well, Timothy was the son of these two unlikely lovers, and because of that, he carried quite a burden. He wasn't like any of the other kids in his neighborhood. But Timothy was also a unique individual, and Paul tells us a few things about him. Now, Timothy wasn't anything special. He wasn't some big spiritual guy. He wasn't out doing miracles. I think if we follow Timothy's example, we can make this Christian stuff easy as pie. First, Paul tells us that Timothy was a servant. We know that Timothy was a servant because he had a servant's mind. I have no one quite like Timothy. He's loyal and genuinely concerned for you. Most people around here are looking out for themselves with little concern for the things of Jesus. But you know yourselves that Timothy is the real thing. It's just amazing how much we've grown over the last 2 years. I don't know anybody around who is just concerned for looking out for themselves. Am I going too fast for you? We all tend to spend most of our time looking in the mirror. We're all concerned about ourselves. Timothy was a unique individual in that he actually cared for others. And I don't believe that this was something that he was born with. Because I don't know about you, but caring about other people is hard work sometimes. It's something you have to learn how to do. And yet Timothy had learned this trait at a young age because he had a servant's mind. He knew in his mind that it was important for him to care for others. And not just to do it because it made him look good, but to do it because he actually cared for others. I think that this is something that we can copy. We can learn to care for others because you know that when you go out and help someone, especially helping them do something that they never even asked you to do, not only do they appreciate it, but it makes you feel good on the inside. You experience that joy. If we can begin to copy the things that Timothy did by caring for others and actually meaning it, we can begin to experience joy and we can start to have that servant's mind. The second thing that Timothy had was he had a servant's training. Paul says he's been a devoted son to me as together we've delivered the message. Now, this is not a commercial for the Wednesday night Bible study, but maybe it is. We have to keep learning about our faith. We have to keep training in this Christian stuff. Because I don't care if you're 22 or 122, we never quite get it all together. We have to keep learning how to do this. And tragically, once we stop learning, our faith begins to die. You see, Timothy not only had this servant's mind where he cared for one another, but he had a servant's training. He learned how to do this Christian stuff. It's not that hard to do, but we do have to do one very important thing. We have to get our tushes up off the couch and actually try. The third thing that Timothy had was he had a servant's reward. You see, Timothy had trained his mind to care for others, and then he had followed Paul around and learned how to do this Christian stuff, and because of that, he was rewarded. He was rewarded by the Apostle Paul in that Paul, when he was at the end of his ministry, handed all the reins of Christianity over to Timothy. And the second reward was that he received all kinds of blessings from folks. Look at what it says. As soon as I see how things are going to fall out for me, I plan to send Timothy off, and then I'm hoping and praying to be right on his heels. Paul was willing to send Timothy off to be in charge of this church. This young kid who was a half-breed, who nobody in the community trusted. What a greater reward than to be shown by God that he trusts you and appreciates you. Timothy wasn't some spiritual superstar. He was just a regular kid from the neighborhood. Actually, that's a lie. He wasn't a regular kid from the neighborhood. He was the half-breed kid from the neighborhood that nobody liked. And yet Paul saw in him the opportunity to be a great leader. And I believe that God sees in you the opportunity to be a great servant as well. And the amazing thing about that is that when we start serving others, that's when we start experiencing joy. Well, there's another person in this passage that we can copy. His name is Epaphroditus. We're going to call him Epi for short. The word Epaphroditus, or the name in Greek, comes from the root word that means charming. Epaphroditus was charming. You know, you can get a whole lot more flies with honey than you can vinegar. And I think it would do us a lot of good to copy Epi's charm. We can gain a lot of insight and influence in people's lives if we'll just be a little bit nice. Some of you aren't very nice. We need to work on that. So let's see what kind of Christian Epaphroditus was. First, Paul tells us that he was a balanced Christian. He was a balanced Christian. But for right now, I'm dispatching Epaphroditus, my good friend and companion in my work. You sent him to help me out. Now I'm sending him to help you out. The people in Philippi heard that Paul was struggling. He had been imprisoned. He was in trouble with the law. And so they took up a collection in their church. They didn't have PayPal. They didn't even have a check that they could mail. They had gold and silver. So when they took up that offering, somebody had to take it to Paul. It was Epaphroditus. He had a tough time on that trip. Not only did he just about get robbed and beaten to death, but then he caught some kind of nasty disease on the way and about died. But Paul tells us that he was a balanced Christian, and we know this because there are 3 Greek words in this little passage in verse 25 that tell us about who Epaphroditus was. First, there's the Greek word that means brother. Paul says he was like his brother, not biological brother, but like my bro. He was Paul's brother. He cared for him. He stood by him. He supported him in whatever he did. We can be a balanced Christian if we'll care for others and support them in the things that they are doing. The second Greek word means companion in labor or co-worker. Paul said, Epaphroditus, he's not only my bro, he's my bud. When I go out and do stuff, Epi's right with me. He's there to support me and help me work through all these difficult things. Heck, he helped me put in a ditch in my backyard last week. We need to be companions in labor. We need to help one another out. You know, there's a lot of things happening in this church that could use some help. Use the noodle God gave you, and if you see a place where you might be able to help out. Be a companion in labor. It'll help you to be a balanced Christian. The third thing that we find in the Greek words here is the Greek word that means fellow soldier. Paul says, he's my fellow soldier in battle. When I have to go into battle, I can depend on Epi to be right there beside me, fighting the good fight. There are some folks in our congregation who are going through some tough times, and they need a fellow soldier to be at their side, helping them to fight the good fight. Take the opportunity to open your eyes and get off the couch and be a fellow soldier. If you can be a brother or a sister, if you can be a companion in labor, and if you can be a fellow soldier, you'll be a balanced Christian, just like Epaphroditus was. He was no spiritual superstar. He was just a regular Joe. But he did these things, and he made a difference. The second thing that we learn about Epaphroditus is that he was a burdened Christian. Especially since recovering from the illness you heard about. He's been wanting to get back to reassure you that he's just fine. He nearly died, you know. Now, I know that none of you here have ever had any struggles or problems in life. None of you have ever been through a bad illness. None of you have ever had a difficult relationship with a spouse or with a child or with that cranky neighbor across the street. None of you have ever gone through any, none of you, don't talk about that here in church. None of you have ever been through any financial struggles, but we all have. We've all had to carry our burdens. And I don't think that God puts burdens on us. I think life puts burdens on us, and sometimes we put burdens on ourselves. What I think God does is I think God takes advantage of those burdens and uses them as an opportunity to strengthen our faith. Epaphroditus could have just thrown in the towel and said, I'm sick and I got beat up and I was trying to do the right thing, but nobody's helping me, so I'm just going to go home. But he toughed it out. He learned that carrying that burden was a valuable thing. We need to be balanced Christians. We need to take the burdens that we've been given and use them for good. And when we do, like Epaphroditus, we'll be a blessed Christian. Paul says people like Epaphroditus deserve the best you can give. Too many folks think God wants to take away their fun. That he's the cosmic killjoy in the sky that's out to ruin your good time. Just the opposite. God wants to make your life be enriched. He wants to take away those surface things that look like they're fun on the outside, but eventually tear you apart. He wants you to have all kinds of wonderful things in life. Things that won't destroy you, things that will build you up. This Christian stuff is not too hard. We can make it look hard if our only example is Jesus. He's a pretty hard example to follow. If our only example is King David or the Apostle Paul. But if we look at guys like Timothy and Epaphroditus, we can discover that there are ways that we can do this Christian stuff. First, we need to be a servant, have a servant's mind, and work on our faith so that we get a servant's training. Because when we do, we'll be blessed. And then we have to be like Epaphroditus. We have to be balanced in our faith. We have to be like a brother or a sister to those around us. We need to work together with them. And then when the time comes for fighting, we need to be ready to stand up and fight with them. And when we do, we'll be blessed. Not just with the thankfulness of someone who we've helped out, but we'll be blessed with the joy that comes from God when we serve one another.